Welcome back. This week we're going to go with the Wasted White Girl. Quite a big difference on this one from when I originally shot it. One, the quality's a lot better. The first couple that I tied there for a while, the deer hair was a little bit off. I couldn't quite get them. Well, the deer hair work has improved a lot in 2 years, so that's one of the big changes. But also, I changed up a few things with the Marabou selection and the craft fur that just make the fly a little bit better. It swims better, and honestly, this is, between this and Andreas's Ragdolly, my favorite swim fly pattern. There's a certain stretch on the mow that we fish, and this is a go-to every single time. I love watching this thing swim, but it just flat out produces as well, and it's got some really big fish for us over the last 2 years. So we're going to readdress this one with a multi-camera setup, hopefully get a little bit better detail for you guys, and explain some things a little bit further in detail, especially the bending of the hook, which I've got a lot of questions on over the years. So to start on this one, it's a Daiichi 1850. This is a size 6. This is the bigger one, the 390U, which I scaled down a little bit. It's a miniature version of this. I'll do that one again here, probably sometime closer to, well, a few months from now. I'll probably get into that one. Same concept and everything. It's just the hook sizes are different, some different colors and everything. But like I said, we're going to get going on this one. So I'm just going to get this as gel spun 100, and I'm going to get this down just a good thread base here, and we're going to put in some deceiver tails. Get that out of the way. This is the Whiting American Hackle that we're going to use. This is like a kind of tan and like almost a cream color. I haven't really used it too awful much for the straight tan colors, but I like the way that this looks, so I'm going to give this a shot, and worst case scenario, if I don't like how it goes, it won't be in production, it'll just go into my fly box. I get to keep that one, fish this one. We'll see how I like the color combination, but I figured I'd throw this one together here real quick. Now with these deceiver tails on this one, there's a curve on these feathers. This right here is the package side. This is what you're looking at right here. Let me get this out. This is the package side, so this is what you're looking at. And there's a natural curve. This one's not too awful enhanced, but it goes this direction right here. What I like to do on these deceiver tails is I like to put them with the curve going away from one another. So it's not going to look like a typical deceiver tail to where it's just straight back. You get this right here. You get that little bit of an opening. And really, I mean, when the fly gets wet, it's not going to make a huge difference. But as you're pulling on this, when it is in the water, when you're pulling on it, it'll come together and then sort of separate again, and it gives just a little bit of extra added movement. And I like the way that this goes for the deceiver tail as opposed to the normal style of just buttoning them up with the curves facing one another. So I'm going to set this right here, and then my measurement is this material clip, this ring that I put in. That's my measurement for my tails. That's the distance that I always want these. So what I'm going to do is just peel this back, and then I'm going to cut with just a little bit. I'm going to leave a little bit of material right there, something for my thread to grab onto. And then I'm going to set this, get a few good wraps on that. Make sure you can see right there my tail's ending right at that material clip. That adds consistency to your flies. You want each one looking as close to the next one as possible, especially when you're tying a bunch of them. Well, not really, especially when you're tying a bunch of them. Just as a general rule of thumb, you want your flies to look consistent as possible. So now what I'm going to do is take just some gold Flashabou, and I'm going to cut a little bit of this off. I think I have, I don't know, 6 to 10 strands, somewhere in that ballpark. There's a couple pieces right there that are a little long that I didn't like too much. So now I'm going to set this on, and I'm going to run it just about the entire way back, the length of my tail. And I want to get these set in. I'm going to bring another set back on the camera side, and then trim these off to length. So there we go. Just a little bit of flash in the tail, something to highlight, you know, especially if you're catching some sun and everything. You got a real good sunny day. Some of this is going to reflect a little bit of light. So on to the next piece right here. We're going to go in with some yellow craft fur. Now the thing to keep in mind on this fly is this back hook is set at a 90 like this. So when I attach it, it's going to be setting with this 90 facing the camera, and then the other hook, I'll just pull this out right now, the other hook is going to be straight up and down like so. Always keep that in mind if you're working with two different colors. If you're working with just the one color, it's not really a huge deal, but it will make a little bit of a difference for you as far as how it meshes with the front one. So just keep in mind that that's going to be going off to the side. Now I'm just going to take a little bit of craft fur. This is yellow, and I'm going to clean this out as best I can, get all of that junk out of the fur, and then I'm going to line these tips up so I get a little bit of extra material in there and it doesn't look too sparse. Just going to trim that off. Now I want to kind of measure this out. I want it going about halfway back my tail. Right there is what I'm looking at. And then I'm going to reverse tie these. So I'm going to set this in. This is going to be the bottom portion of my fly. Remember that we're tying this in. This one's going to be at a 90, so keep that in mind. And I'm just going to advance my thread slightly and then go right back to the point of the hook right here. Now I'm going to come back and I'm going to trim this yellow out without busting up my tail or catching any of my flash. If you don't get all of those fibers, that's fine. It's going to get covered up when we reverse tie these. Now one thing that I always do, this is something that I've learned after tying a couple of these. If you have a lot of bulk on this craft fur and you don't have a really, because it's non-compressible, if you don't have a really tight couple of wraps on there, this stuff may want to rotate on you a little bit. In order to curb that, what you can do is just take this, pick this up, and then go right in front of all your material. Now all your thread wraps aren't on, you're getting down to the actual hook. You're not covering up or you're not tying over any craft fur. And then just give that a good squeeze and then advance back to that. Now you have a couple of anchor wraps underneath that craft fur and directly on the hook. It won't rotate on you now. So now we'll go back to a tan craft fur, and I'm just going to pick a little bit of this out, get about the same amount that we had with the yellow. And I don't like how that piece is picking for me here, so I'm going to go on this side. And get a little bit of this craft fur in tan. Once again, clean this out pretty good. Get rid of all the junk. I got some more stuff on the table there. I may need just a little bit more. It looks kind of sparse, but I'll see what it looks like once I have it on there. I may be okay with it. Yeah, that'll work. So now I'm going to set this down, just measuring it out, make sure you're nice and even with your yellow that you have before. Now, what I do is before I make a complete wrap on this, I loosen my hands up a little bit and I allow that tan to travel down on the side of the hook a little bit. And then I get a couple of good wraps. And what this does is it makes a nice break between your tan and yellow. see it here once I flip this over. I just want to get a couple more good wraps in there. That way I can work my way back. Now, just peel this back and you'll see that break that I'm talking about. Actually, I want to bring this forward just a little bit. I didn't have my tan quite far enough, so I want to get a few more wraps. Make sure that that's nice and even. There we go. I had my yellow tied in a little bit further forward than the tan, so this will help even that out. Now you can see that nice break that I was talking about right here between your tan and yellow, and then again on this side. So we'll get this tied in, and then we'll get our body material ready to go. Get that out of the way. For the body on this one, we're just going to go with a gold UV puller. And I'll find my section here that looks pretty good. There's one section there that you can see how this stuff's kind of moving forward, and it's just kind of looped around, and it's just not as even as this right here where it's coming back at an angle. So I'm just going to get rid of that. I mean, you can tie it in and it'll cooperate for you, but that one looked like it wanted to fight me a little bit, so I'm going to go with this section right here. Now you'll see on this there's a little bump in this body right here from where we reverse tied that craft fur in. There's a little bump right there, so in order to ease that a little bit, tie this UV puller in right in front of that, and it kind of makes a nice little transition right there to where you don't have a huge bump, and it's really not all that much to worry about. By the time you get the Marabou thrown in there, you're not even going to notice it. So, but it does help get rid of that little lip that's there. So there we go. Now we're going and we're just spinning this forward. See how it wanted to rotate on me a little bit there? I'm going to stop. I had some materials wanting to go forward on me, and I just rotated that braid a little bit, and now the material's working how I want it to. 4 to 5 wraps and just throw a good anchor in there. I'm gonna get one more, I think. Yeah, I'll take that. Now we're gonna tie that off. Get back there. And tie that off, get this out of the way, and then we're gonna throw in some Marabou. Just gonna clean this up with a few thread wraps. Got a nice area to work with right here. There you can see the section that we're going to be working with. We have that nice little 1/4 inch section of hook that we can still throw on there. We can still throw our material on. So now, what I go with on this for Marabou, I use this Woolly Bugger Marabou in yellow. You can use blood quill if you want. I just like the way this looks. It gives me a little bit more surface area on this. The only thing that you need to really watch out for is if you have a stem that's really thick, like you see on this right here. If it runs all the way up to the tips, don't use the tips, peel off from the side and use that section. I'll highlight that once I get to the tan here. So now I'm just measuring this out, and I want my Marabou coming back into my craft fur. That's one thing that I did with this pattern. When I first started tying it, I had stubby little sections of Marabou. It may have only come back about halfway, and it was just really, it didn't give me the motion that I wanted. I mean, it still swam, it did everything that I thought that it needed to, but adding this length to the Marabou really helps with the overall performance on this fly. So now you can see I have this tied in. I got my yellow Marabou going back into it. Now I'm going to go into some tan on the top. And I said that I will demonstrate picking off the side of one here. Because a lot of times going through this woolly bugger Marabou, it's cheap. It's cheap material. It's a low quality. You know, it's not like the blood quills to where you get a lot of nice straight material. This is just meant to be uneven and bulky, essentially. So what I do, I take about, I find how much I want to work with, stand that out to a 90, and then just rip that off on the side. And then if it's too uneven for you, I'll just bust that off at the very tips with my thumb, and then I have a nice section to work with right there. I'm going to measure this out, make sure it's the same distance as my yellow. I'm going to set that in and get a couple of good wraps to really secure that in place. Now, go through this right here. That is our back section. There we go. If you want to, you can take a tan marker and touch this up a little bit just to cut down on that white some. You can do yellow, whatever color you want, or you can just leave it white. We're going to throw some material in there, and that's all going to be covered up anyhow. So it's not going to be that big of a deal if you leave it the way that it sits at white. Grab our connection wire here. And we'll set this in. Give that a quick pull, and then I'm going to find a bead here. I can get that open. This is a 3D bead from Hairline. I just use one of these on this pattern. If you want to go with just the regular glass beads that you see me use a lot, throw two on there. It'll just space it out to about the same as what this is here. So we'll get this one out of the vise, and we'll bring in our front hook, which is a Gami B10S. This is a size 1. And I had one out, there it is. Like I was saying, this is a B10S size 1. And I'm just going to get this in the vise real quick and set this in. When you set it in, make sure that you have a good bite on this one, because we're going to be bending it. And the B10S is it's a thicker wired hook, so it takes a little bit more to bend this one. Make sure you got it in the vise pretty good before you go heating it up and trying to bend it. One more thing I need here. Is a lighter. So I'm going to find this point right here. I want it about at the third way point on this hook. That's where I'm going to start heating this up. I'm going to set that in here. Just let that go for a couple seconds. Then I'm going to grab my Leatherman, and I'm going to take about a 30-degree bend directly toward the camera. There you can see that one right there. And then I'm going to take 5 degrees down, and I'm just going to give that a quick bend. I want a little bit more aggressive on that. There we go. That's the bend that we're after. I mess around with these a little bit when I'm bending them. Some of them I'll get real aggressive and go almost to like a 45-degree bend. I messed around with it a little bit. I really didn't like the way that it swam. It kind of hindered it more than anything. So this 30-degree with the 5 to 10 down seems to be about the best. And yeah, I'll I'll live with that one. I was going to go a little bit more aggressive on the downward bend, but I think I like how that one's sitting. So now I'm going to take and connect my back hook. With these gommies, you want to stop your thread right at the point of the hook if you start coming down. If you start going back toward the barb of the hook, what's going to happen is you're going to start tying on a downward angle, and it's going to mess up some of the articulation on your pattern. So now remember, 90 degrees, there's the bend of the hook, or there's our hook point right there. That's going to be facing toward the camera. Make sure that when you tie this in, your wire is running parallel. And then I'm just going to get a few loose turns in there. I'm going to bring that right to where it touches my hook, and I want to adjust that just slightly. Right there, you can see the loop that I have about the width of the bead. And then just take this stuff up. Get a couple of really good solid wraps in there. And now you can see the orientation is the same as what we're going to have as far as colors go. Our tans on the top, our yellows on the bottom. We're not going to have anything mismatched when we do our front hook. I'm going to bring this around now. And just double this wire over. Find some junk scissors here, wherever they're at. I'm going to trim this stuff out. So now, if you pay attention to where your wire is on the top, and where, just project about where you're going to be reverse tying that craft fur in. That's going to eliminate the bump on this section. After you do a couple of them, you'll be able to gauge exactly where you want it, and it makes it a lot easier to tie in and get that nice seamless transition to where you don't have to worry about that bump that we did on the back hook. Not that it made a huge difference, but if it makes your life a little bit easier, why not do it? So once again, we're going to take some yellow here. This is going to go on the bottom. You get that trimmed out there. And then clean this out. There's a pile of junk that came out of that one. Even up your tips. And then I want this going into my Marabou. Half to 3/4 of the way back. Some of these strands are going to be a little bit longer. You can always just pick them out, trim them if you need to. So there's about the distance that I want right there. I'm going to flip this upside down. This one can be a little bit challenging to tie in at first. Actually, just go ahead and trim that off, because you're splitting this hook. So I'm just going to get some loose wraps in here, advance it to the front, and then go ahead and trim that out like so. Like I said before, get a couple of wraps in the front, that way this isn't going to rotate on you. You can see that craft fur is not going anywhere now. We got some good solid wraps going right onto the hook. So now it's not all on the craft fur. I think I wanted to rotate on me a bit. Back to our tan on the top. Let me grab a little bit more there. This tan is a little bit more sparse than the yellow. So I'm going to grab a little bit extra here. And we'll clean this one out. Same as before, and then even up our tips again. I'm pretty happy with that. Go ahead and trim this off again. Yeah, I screwed that one up. It slipped in my hand. Just grab another section here. Put the scissors through my thumb. Alright, line these tips up again. And I'm not going to mess this one up this time. Go in and reverse tie this one. Again, making sure that your tan and your yellow are the same length or very close to it. Get a couple of solid wraps on this. Really anchor it down in place. And then if you remember right, where we doubled our wire back over, my deer hair comb's wanting to slide away from me here. If you remember right, where you doubled your deer hair wire back over, we're going to have that nice transition here. So now we're just going to peel this stuff back, making sure that they're tied in at the same point. Work that yellow around your hook. Bring it up on both sides. We're still going to have a little bit of a bump here because that craft fur is just a little bit heavier than that wire. For some reason, this damn thing wants to keep rotating. There we go. Alright. A little bit of a bump there, but not a big deal. I'm going to work this thread back to the point of my hook. That way I have plenty of room for my body. And then go back to the body material. And I'm going to tie this in right in front of that craft fur, and I'm going to work it back. And I'm going all the way up to the bend of my hook, right behind that bend. Bring that thread around, get it in your cradle, and then just work your body forward. 4 to 5 wraps, give it an anchor, all the way up. And I'm going to take one off. Yeah. So I'm going to leave a little bit of room there on that body. Just so I can get my next 2 stacks of Marabou in there. Let me see if I like that or not. That's too short. Too short. So we're going to go back to our plumes here. There's a good one right there. I can pick off the side. That has some pretty good length to it. Same as before. We're going to measure this out. We want this stuff to be nice and long, not stubby how I used to tie them in there. We got good length right there. Measure this out. I want it going back almost into the Marabou that I tied in on the back hook. So get that measured out. Chopped a couple pieces of gold. Not a big deal. And now I'm going to just trim this stuff out of there. I don't like tying over that. It creates a decent amount of bumps. So you can see the length that we have on our Marabou going back into 1, that craft fur, and 2, almost touching the previous stacks of Marabou that we tied in on the back side. Same thing with the tan over the top. Just bust that out. I don't know if this one's going to be quite long enough. No, it's going to be a little bit short. So we'll go back to the pack and find one that's going to work for us here. This is a good one, I think. That's a pretty good piece right there. A lot of this is going to get covered up by your collar. The main one that I really focus on is that bottom one, but some of this isn't going to, some of this will be free from the collar and it'll give you a little bit extra movement. So make sure that your length is good on this one. That damn feather. I don't like how that one's sitting. It was kicking off to my side. Just not gonna make it. Not gonna make it. If I'm not happy with it when I first tie it in, there's no way I'm gonna be happy with it once it's sitting in the fly box. Alright. Get that nice and even there. Get that tied in, and then just trim up that white from the Marabou. And now you can see we're tying our collar in right at the start of that bend in the hook. So what I'm going to do now is just half hitch this, get that out of the way, and we're going to go into some 200. Gel spun 200 for the head on this one, and because it's going away from me, I'm going to angle my vise just a little bit, make sure I'm still in focus there. Get that cradle out of the way, and I'm just going to run this over the top of my 100. Now, this is the part of the fly that will make or break it. This is what drives your fly's swim action. Take your time on the deer hair head, don't rush through it. And this thing will be quite the swimmer for you. I'm going to build a collar out of this first section that I'm cutting off. Set that right there. This is a little bit on the short side of hair that I like to work with, but we're gonna make it work. Grab yourself a good section right here, get it in your stacker. Get that stuff out of the way. Look through, I got a little bit more that I want to get on there. Alright, now I'm going to measure this out. Before I do that, actually, I'm going to get my straw here, and I want to throw this over the top, that way I'm going to throw this over the top, that way when I trim this up, I'm not going to be trimming up my Marabou. I'm going to be able to see everything in there, and it makes it a lot easier. So just get that stuff out of your way. If you want to, you can use like a hair clip or something like that. I like the straw. It's not as bulky. It doesn't get in your way as much. So that's what I tend to gravitate to, is the straw. There we go. We've got our collar here. I'm going to measure this out, and I want it at least to the point of my hook. Somewhere between the point and the barb of the hook is where I want my collar to be. So I'm going to measure this out. I got a pile of it there too. I'm going to measure this out, and you can see it's a little uneven. I'll fix that. But you can see right where I have that between the point and the barb, and I'm losing it out of that hand there. So I'm just going to cut that off nice and square. Make sure that my thread is starting right where the bend of the hook is. I'm going to set this in and get 2 secure wraps, and then my third one I'm really pulling down on that. And then there's my collar. The underneath side's unobstructed. I'm going to go 1, 2, just right through that. A little bit of rotation there. I got just 2 or 3 fibers to where I'm blocking things a little bit, but I think we'll let that slide. So now, this is how I do these white girls. After a lot of time experimenting with how to tie these, the best way to get the deer hair in place, I always start on the bottom. I do these two-toned and stacked. I always start on the bottom of these. Start with my yellow, and then I'm able to see the entirety of this pattern on the top, or the entirety of the color on the top. I know exactly what room I have to work with, where I need to place the material. So just, once again, clean out your deer hair, and this dang thing is not going to be happy until it falls off. Clean out your deer hair, and then on this I cut the tips off. I'm going to cut that. I'm going to get this in place underneath. So I'm setting this underneath here, making sure that I'm tying in the center of that bundle. And then I'm going to go 1. That slipped on me a little bit. I need to move that back just slightly. There we go. Like I said, making sure that you're in the center of that bundle, and I'm going to go 1, 2, a third. You can see it really starting to flare. I'm clearing this hair out of the way. You can see all of that white right there, and then I'm just pulling down, and then that flares my underneath side on that yellow. I still have all of this room to work with on the top, and it is clear as can be right through there. We're going to go back to this tan, or this is a camel actually. Couldn't find the straight tan that I was after, so we're going to go with this color here. Once again, we're taking a good chunk of deer hair for the top. Clean that out really good, and then cut the tips. I got a lot of hair there, and a lot of hair. We're going to cut those tips, and I'm going to rotate this a little bit. You can see I'm just setting this right on the top. I'm not worrying about where any of the other material's at. I have a good grip on this tan, and I'm using the same thread path as before that I used on that yellow. So I get 3 good wraps in there, start pulling to where that thread disappears, and then pull straight down. You see it flare on you. You get that nice section of deer hair right there. Now I have just enough room to push this back and get 1 good spin of tan on the other, in front of all of this. So I'm just moving all of this stuff in front, getting a couple of good wraps right there, cleaning everything up real nice, and now I'm going back to this tan. I want a good section in here, and this one's going to be a pure spin because we have enough room to work with. It's going to be a pure spin. If you want to, you could do that hybrid stack spin if you want, but there's plenty of room in this, so we're going to go ahead and just do this as a straight spin. Cut the tips there. Get everything lined up, making sure that you're tying in the center section of this stack. Now, what I'm going to do is take my ring finger and my thumb to catch the underneath, and then my pointer and my middle to catch the top. And that's keeping all of that yellow out of my way, so I'm not going to have any migration into the tan, and it clears room for me to spin this. So I go 1, 2, 3. There you can see the spin. My yellow's still unimpeded, and I'm just working this back enough to where I can get in here to catch the eye and whip finish this. One, two, three. Same thing. We're gonna go whip finish right in front of that eye. One, two, three. I'm gonna get a second whip finish in there, and then we'll go ahead and get rid of our thread. Before I go trimming this, I'm gonna take my old comb that used to be sitting in here that once again the pups got to, as you can see. It's a little beat up, but still works for this purpose. Comb this stuff out real nice, have everything nice and clean, easy to work with, and then we'll go ahead and get a razor blade and start on this. When I trim these, I come the whole way around, sitting looking at it right like this, because remember you have that bend sitting there. Come around, and I always make my first trim on the top portion of this, because I want both top and bottom rounded. And don't get real aggressive, just push right through here and aim for the tips of your collar. That's going to give you a nice outline on the front, as you can see right there. Gives you just a nice outline, nothing too aggressive, nothing unmanageable, and you didn't cut too awful much off to where you're not going to be able to get this shape back. Same thing on the underneath side now. I have this sitting right like this, and I just make a nice rounded cut right through here. Nice rounded cut through there. And if you did this right, not that it's really going to matter a whole lot. I mean, if you have some migration from your tan into your yellow, it's not going to make a big difference. But you can see this right through here to where everything is nice and clean. You have that nice break. Is it going to matter to the fish? No. Where it does matter, I think, is if you get some of that yellow migrating into the tan, you're not going to get as complete of a spin, especially if you catch, you know, a couple dozen fibers. When you go pulling down on that, your tan's not going to spin as well, and it may be heavy on one side or the other. So you can see this bend right here. I'm trimming into the bend now. I just want to take a good swipe with this, and you can get pretty aggressive. Just remember where your bend's at. Remember how aggressive your bend is, and just take a swipe right through that. And like I said, I get pretty aggressive on these. And you have that nice flat section right there on your fly. That nice cup section. This section right here, because of the way that it's bent, will wind up catching all of the water, and that steers your fly on this. So now I want to come back and just trim this up a little bit more on the top, bottom, and then the sides, or the one side, my side. And I'm just feathering this right into my collar. Feathering that right into the collar. Get a couple of these short pieces out of there. I'm not going to pick too much on that one because it's looking pretty good so far. Once again, I'm just cleaning this up. Working my scissor right through that. Now I'm going to bring, and I want to trim this side down just a little bit. So all I'm going to do is just have my scissors here, or my razor blade, and I'm just going to form that one section just slightly. Don't get real aggressive on this. If you get aggressive, because you have a bend in this blade, you're going to wind up chopping off the bottom half of your fly, and it's not going to swim how it's supposed to. So just nice and easy through here. Some of these longer ones, I'll just move off of this curve altogether, and I'll just kind of trim those and feather them into the collar. Now there's a few yellow ones there that are just absolutely not allowed to be incorporated into the collar, so you have to trim those off or you're not going to catch a damn fish. So make sure that you get those out. Lee's laughing his ass off right now, I guarantee it. Anyhow, there you can see the shape and the color break that we're after. Before I put the eyes on, I'm going to find the eye of this hook, and I'm going to look at the opposite side, seeing where I'm going to have my eye, and I'm just going to come on this side, and I'm just going to knock a little bit of this off so I have a spot to put this eye into. Just enough to where I'm going to have an 8mm eye sitting there. I don't want to trim a ton of that out to where I lose the shape of the head, but I want to be able to set that on there, because if you try and set it on when it's rounded, it's just not going to sit well for you and you wind up losing your eyes. But that seems to help with that issue a little bit. Now I'm going to go, these are, like I was saying, 8mm. These are dark iridescent from MFC. These are fish eyes. Pair pretty well with this color combination, I feel. I'm going to set a little bit of gel on both spots. There's one, and then some gel on this side as well. Don't get a whole lot in there, because if you go getting too much glue on this, it winds up coming out the side of the eyes and it gives like a little funky white residue on there. Messes your fly up a little bit. So now, flip this back around. We're going to get our last eye on right here. Just kind of set that on, and then I'll take and pinch both sides just to make sure that I have a good set. Everything's good on there. I'm going to remove the straw. And there we have our Marabou coming back on the top and bottom. Got a little bit of travel there, but I'm trying not to stick my thumb. There we go. We'll bring this around. Get everything set and how it's going to be, and then give this a quick spin. There you can see all of the color breaks, the trim on this. And what I'll do is I'll take this out of the vise as well and show you just a quick look from the front angle on this, how that fly is bent and how it's going to wind up catching that cup. Right here, when you pull on this, it's going to catch that cup and it's going to dip it down. When that dips down, you get a horizontal rotation on a fly. So not only is it diving like this, but it's rotating at the same time because that water's catching it, and you're going to have the turn of that fly, and it's just really erratic in the water. The eats that you get on this thing are absolutely explosive. Hopefully this helps you guys out a little bit. Hopefully I clarified some of the stuff, some of the questions that I had gotten from before on this pattern. But as always, if there's anything further that you want to ask on this, by all means reach out to me and I'll try and explain it a little bit better. But thanks as always for watching, guys, and we'll catch you next Wednesday.